Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming today. Appreciate your time and attention. I'm State Representative Bob Barrett from R-Lindstrom, Minnesota, and I'm here today to talk about the Viking Stadium, the Ziggy Wolfs, and the E-Pull Tab anniversary of when it was first introduced. By way of introduction, I guess the first thing I'd like to talk about is kind of my background a little bit. In the last 9 days, for what it's worth, I've reffed 6 youth football games. Younger age, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. A couple years ago, I think I had a record winter where I reffed about 110 basketball games, youth basketball games. And then besides that, I've been umpiring baseball for about 25 years since my days at Mankato State, who coincidentally, I grew up in South Dakota, went over to Mankato State for college, partly, not entirely, but think of a mind of a 17-year-old boy, partly because the Vikings were training there for training camp, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to attend college at the place where the Vikings were attending training camp. So, lifelong sports fan. In fact, I'm in a pretty good mood today because I was 2-0 yesterday in my fantasy football teams. So, pretty happy about that, especially after the week before I was 0-2. So, with that as a background, I think my one other thing is I went to Mankato State and took up accounting. So, I have an accounting degree and spent about 20 years as an analyst. Marketing, financial, and otherwise. But so by way of introduction, that's kind of who I am, among other things. The E-Pull Tab revenue, as you all know, it's been around for about a year. And I want to say up front, for every dollar that was expected to come in for E-Pull Tabs, we have achieved a nickel. That's pretty bad. I mean, that is futility at its worst. If you look at that in comparison to other things we do in life, if a college kid took a test and got 5% on their test, eventually they'd be flunking out of college. If Blair Walsh had a 5% accuracy rate on his field goals, he would be out of the NFL. He wouldn't have survived training camp. If Shaquille O'Neal, as bad of a free throw shooter as Shaquille O'Neal is, about 52%, that's 10 times better than how E-Pull Tabs performed in the first year. I'm probably dating a lot of you. You guys remember Dean Chance at all? Pitcher for the Minnesota Twins. He went 0 for 50 one time, batting. You know, pitchers didn't bat too often. But his lifetime batting average of .067 is better than what E-Pull Tabs have performed. So with that, we could talk about why it happened. That's not my goal today. But my goal is to talk about what the solution has been and why that solution needs to change. Solution was, once the administration found out about that, instead of protecting the Minnesota taxpayer, they're protecting a billionaire owner from New Jersey, who not only is not in the top 2%, he's in the top 1% of the top 1% of the people in our country. That's how wealthy he is. So instead of protecting our taxpayers, the governor, decided to raise taxes on middle-class Minnesota in order to fund the shortfall. I think that's wrong. The public thinks it's wrong, and we need to do something different. Now, I realize it's late in the game. This is probably my 3rd or 4th attempt to get the attention of the administration to find a better way to fund the stadium. It's probably my 3rd or 4th bill. I met with Governor Dayton earlier in the year, had a very nice conversation with him, said I was more than willing to help find a solution. And so this is another attempt, I think the best attempt, to understand and to communicate with the public why we need to change direction. Next, you have the issue of the contribution from the Vikings, or from particularly Ziggy Wolf and Mark Wolf. Up until a few weeks ago, they've been saying the Vikings are contributing $477 million to the stadium. Unfortunately, that's not correct. When you take all the private funding sources and you subtract it from what the Wolf's contribution has said to be, they might actually make money on the building of the Viking Stadium. That is unconscionable, especially when the Minnesota taxpayer will be contributing $348 million. Now, why do I say they'll make money? Well, you look at what's happened around the country. You look at the 49ers, great example of how to build a stadium in a community. They partnered with the city of Santa Clara. They exposed personal seat licenses and naming rights. They didn't hide them. In Minnesota, they're hidden. requirements of the bill that was passed in 2012 requires that information to be private so that the taxpayer will not know how much money the Wolves will get from naming rights and from personal seat licenses. But in Santa Clara, there's an article here, May 8th, 2013, that says 49ers stadium revenue tops $1 billion after Santa Clara leaders approve Levi Stadium name deal. $1 billion they're getting in Santa Clara, $1 billion from naming rights and personal seat licenses. $1 billion. That pretty much covers the cost of building that stadium. When you add in the $200 million loan gift from the NFL, it takes care of it. No money from the team, no money from the city, certainly no money from the state. California isn't kicking in a dime to that stadium in Santa Clara. When you look at all that, and you look at the fact in Minnesota, taxpayers, state and city, are contributing $500 million. There's something wrong here, which goes into my solution. My solution involves taking that third-party revenue, exposing it to the public, separating it from the Wolf's contribution and the state and city contribution, and acknowledging it's there. You know, the Wolves don't talk about that because they don't want you to know. We should talk about it. In San Francisco, they achieved about $1 billion in naming rights and personal seat licenses. We can do that here. Well, we can do a part of that here. So my bill only requires $150 million in naming rights, $175 in personal seat licenses. It's $325 million. That's not $1 billion. Be great if we could achieve $1 billion. If we do, it's a home run. We have a solution that we can be proud of. So that's why I'm here today, to expose and to talk about this particular bill. Here are the current funding streams. Again, Vikings, $477 million. A lot of that is not their money, not from their checkbook, from other sources. Under my bill, Minneapolis, $150 million. State of Minnesota, we saved the taxpayers $248 million if my proposal can get through. That's $250 million that taxpayers can save, or we can save for the taxpayers. The Vikings contribution would go down from $477 million to $200 million. They would save using their mindset of contribution. With the following, NFL loan gift, $200 million, naming rights, $150, and PSLs, $175. You add the two together, you get to the cost of the stadium, done out in the open. The authority can help sell the personal seat licenses. In fact, there might be, I'm not a tax accountant by any stretch of the imagination, I'm not, but I would guess if that revenue from the PSLs go into the authority, I would guess the Vikings could save some taxes on that by not having to, by having it not be their revenue. So this is a win-win for everyone, certainly a win-win for the taxpayer, and I hope and would like Governor Dayton to give it a lot of consideration. The public wants this. If you look, no matter who you talk to, the public is outraged at where we're at now, especially the fact that e-poll tab revenues are down 95%. My solution is a responsible one, and I would hope that Governor Dayton would take it in the serious light that it was given. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Representative Barrett, the Vikings and the Sports Authority are planning on signing the final papers today, maybe tomorrow, maybe Wednesday, but are you asking that this all be delayed again and reopen the Vikings bill?
I'm asking that a better solution be looked at and agreed upon. What we have now, it shouldn't go forward.
Well, that means you want to stop the stadium from going forward, the construction, because they're going to sign these papers.
Right. Well, if you look at things, you look at what we're doing in our state, you look at the warehouse tax, you look at the other taxes that Governor Dayton has said can delay. We can delay looking at that until next spring. Nothing will happen, nothing bad will happen if we wait on those issues. We had a special session in which we talked about relief for some people in Minnesota. We had 3 hours on the House floor. We were doing nothing. We were called into session at 10 a.m. We came back at about 1. We had plenty of time to talk about other issues. We had plenty of time to get other things done, and we didn't do it because it wasn't part of the agenda. So if we can wait 6-7 months for taxpayers to be relieved of the burden of a warehouse tax and a farm equipment repair tax, We can wait 6 months to save the taxpayer $250 million. I think the public would agree that waiting half a year to save $250 million is worth the cost and the benefit from that equation.
So open the stadium in 2017 or 2018 rather than 2016?
Well, I'm not on the authority. I don't know exactly what their timelines are. I do acknowledge your point that the timelines are real short. But waiting half a year to save $250 million, I think the public would say that's a win-win.
What leverage do you feel the state has with the Vikings here? I mean, do you suggest that the governor say you sort of have to accept these new terms, or we're not going to build the stadium at all?
We have a lot of leverage. We had a lot of leverage a year and a half ago that we didn't use. You know, the Wilfs rode all over us. They really did. If you look at our bill compared to the most recent bills in the country, 49ers, Cowboys, Giants, they got everything they asked for. So their value of their team went up $200 million, according to Forbes, because of a stadium. Asking them to contribute $200 million because the value of their team went up $200 million, it's not asking for a lot. So I think when you look at it from a business perspective and understand you're dealing with business people, I would hope that the facts would weigh out and they would come to realize that they need the stadium. We want the Vikings. We want to put forward a good solution that everyone can be proud of, and we don't have that now.
Are you asking then that the signing be delayed? Is that your ask here today? Or are you asking instead that when we get back into session in February, that we revise the state's portion of the funding?
We need to have an agreement with the Vikings that they will contribute a minimum of $200 million out of their own pocket. However that happens. I would like that to happen today. Given Governor Dayton's pattern with other taxes, other issues, he's wanted to delay them until next spring. So given that mindset, if we need to delay till next spring, then we need to delay. It's up to Governor Dayton.
So you
I
are
would
asking for
prefer,
a delay right now.
I would prefer that we renegotiate the deal. That's what the people want. That's what the people expect. And that when we do that, we get to an agreement that everyone can live with. Especially the people in Minnesota that were promised they weren't going to contribute a dime to the stadium, and now they are contributing $348 million. And those people who aren't heard, they don't come here to the Capitol, they don't ring a lot of bells on the issue, but they're out there. You see them in the paper, you see them on the news, I see them or hear them when they call me, when they send me emails. They want something to change. They're not happy with this deal, and nor should they be. They were told they wouldn't have to contribute a dime, and they're contributing $348 million. And it's happened without a lot of fanfare up until now. And given the fact that we had e-poll tab revenue, an expectation that that would fund the state portion initially, the Vikings say they were going to contribute $477 million, even though I and many other people knew that they weren't. The question remains, why would we need the Vikings to build a stadium in which all of their money is coming from a third party? I mean, think about that inherently. Think about how, is that a right thing to do? Why would the Vikings coming to the table negotiating when they're not contributing a dime out of their own checkbook? What's the point? I mean, why couldn't we do what the 49ers did and what they did in Santa Clara, which is get all that money ourselves, build the stadium? It's all about negotiating and leverage. And unfortunately, a year and a half ago, the Vikings had all the leverage.
But I mean, isn't this done and decided? And couldn't the Vikings very well make a straight-faced argument that they're part of a business called the NFL, and part of the benefit of that is they have money to build a stadium, and that people wouldn't need these seats or wouldn't have demand for the seats if they weren't putting their product on the field, so that arguably could be their revenue and not just some third-party revenue. I mean, there is a counter-argument they can make to these points that this has nothing to do with their money.
Sure. They've made that counter-argument for about a year and a half. And so my counter to that counter is a stadium or a team owner, multi-billionaire, top 1% of the top 1%, should contribute a minimum of $200 million out of their own pocket when they're getting the advantage of a NFL stadium, cutting-edge stadium, in which their team will play for 30 years, in which their team, the value of their team goes up $200 million initially, among all the other benefits they will get over the life. That would be my counter to that. But I agree, they've said that for a year and a half. They said, you know, it's our, well, first of all, they said it's the Viking contribution. Recently, if you look at the language that they've used, they've now changed it to Viking guarantee of private contribution. So at least if nothing else happens, at least I've gotten an acknowledgement that the money they're contributing is not their money.
Have you talked to the governor, legislative leaders, or anybody else who makes a difference in this in recent days?
Not in recent days, no. As I mentioned, I met with Governor Dayton a couple months ago.
Why are you just coming here and telling us? Why aren't you talking to people to make a difference?
Well, I think the people make a difference, and I think you guys make a difference as well. And so I think talking to the people, getting that information out there. There's one person only that, well, actually not, the legislative leaders, obviously, but Governor Dayton. It's up to him to go ahead or not go ahead. And so I've talked with him. He knows my opinion. I could go to him again. Last spring, I had 2 or 3 stadium bills I went to him with, thought they were good. This is even better because I know more about the 49ers situation. Knowing more about it, knowing what worked. My argument would be to him or the people or you or anyone else who wants to listen is that this is a logical solution. It's not partisan. That's why I don't have anyone else behind me today. I chose not to ask other people to be behind me because then it would be seen as partisan. This is a good solution, regardless of whether I'm up here or anyone else. This is the proper way to fund it. It's not too late. It's almost too late, but not too late. We haven't signed a contract, and that legislation can be changed with the right negotiating philosophy and with the right facts out in the open.
Representative, one of the things that they have been negotiating and will probably sign this week is the agreements that include personal seat licenses. At what level are you, in your calculations, figuring people will pay for a personal seat license?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have an answer to that. I have not looked into the detail of what the 49ers or any other city and team have used. But what I will say is that, again, back to an article that I think is factual from the San Jose Mercury News, they're getting about $850 or so, $850 million for PSLs. I'm saying we'll get 175. San Francisco, you look at their market, you compare that to the Twin Cities, they're a little bit larger. Sure, they have the tech giants down near San Jose in that area, so they have more wealth, but not a lot more wealth. This is 175, they've gotten 850. So this is about a quarter, and we certainly are not the quarter of the size they are in the San Francisco 49er area. So we have Fortune 500 companies. We have, how many do we have? 17, 18 Fortune 500 companies. They have roughly the same amount. I think they have around 23.
Well,
You look at average income.
$30,000 then, it sounds like, for $30,000 for a PSL here in Minnesota.
I don't
That's
know.
what those numbers seem to reflect.
I wish I knew, and I would know if that information was made public before now. But as we know, the legislation signed in 2012 made all of that private. Nobody knows. The only people who know what's going to be charged are the administration from the Vikings. And I wish we all knew. If we all knew, we'd be able to make an even more intelligent decision on where to go. But none of us know. And that's why I think exposing that to the public, having it be a positive alternative or a positive option to help build a stadium that many people want to build would help the cause and not hurt it. Right now it's private, nobody knows, it's kind of in the back corner, nobody really wants to talk about it, the Vikings don't want to talk about it. Governor Dayton didn't know about it, apparently, a few months ago, even though it was in the legislation from the beginning. So it's being used kind of right now, viewed as kind of a negative thing. And in another city, it's a positive thing, and they've used it effectively to build a stadium without a city and a state contributing.
Representative Barrett, as you said, you've taken several stabs at this issue. I wonder, with the signing of a deal with the Wilfs now imminent, are you preparing a stab at this in the 2014 session, even if the deal is in place?
You know, I don't know what the future will hold in that regard. I do know that Governor Dayton's talked about an unsession. And if you look at that concept of an unsession, repealing bad laws or bad things that happen, I think this is a perfect example of what could be introduced in the 2014 session in order to communicate what we can do to benefit taxpayers in Minnesota.
But
So,
how could you change a contract like that?
Well, the contract hasn't been signed yet.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be signed very soon, and you're talking about revisiting it next year.
Yeah, I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm hoping we change it today before a contract is signed. I got a couple emails from folks. They saw me on, saw an email of mine or whatever. Said, Representative Barrett, how can you do this? You are changing a contract. You're opening up a contract. No, the fact is we have no contract today with the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of people think we do. We don't. There is no contract.
So you're saying you're going to the public today. Do you expect the public to rise up in the next few hours or days and demand a change?
I'm hoping Governor Dayton will see this as a logical solution that is worth doing and is better than the alternative of having taxpayers spend $348 million out of their pockets that they were told they would never have to do.
But you told me a little bit ago you were talking to the public now. You didn't ask for a meeting with Dayton. Which is it? Are you talking to Dayton now or are you talking to the public?
I'm talking to both.
What?
I mentioned, I talked to Governor Dayton before. I said, I have an open door. If I can help you in any way, please call me. That's
what
how we
good
left
is
it.
it?
We had a very good discussion. I told him my proposals at the time. He is aware of this, obviously. If he would like to come to me, I can call. You're right. It's probably a good idea. I should probably call him once I leave and say, you know what? I'm sincere in my plan. I hope we can make a change. I hope we can do it together. That's a great idea. I thought maybe, since he already knows I'm involved, since he already knows I'm open to helping out, he would contact me. That hasn't happened, but yeah, I will do that. I will call him up and say, one more time, let's do this thing the right way.
And will you put out something on the same thing, you put this advisory out with your, whatever response you get from the governor too? On the same list that you announced that you're having the news conference after you contact the governor's office? So we know what happens?
I could probably do that, yeah. I mean, it depends on what we talk about and whether he would like it to stay private or not. I don't know.
And would you say that if the contract is signed, then it's done and finished, it can't be reopened, or would you still think that there's a possibility to reopen it?
Well, I'm here now because the contract is not
Okay,
signed.
but once it is signed, are you done?
You know, that's speculative. I just mentioned that it could be viewed in the 2014 session. We have a lot of bills, laws that are done. They're in law, statute, that Governor Dayton would like to reopen. This could be seen the same way. I don't know what the contract would say. Hopefully that contract would be publicly available. I'd read through the contract and see what options there would be. Hopefully maybe the conversation we're having today would influence that contract. There are a lot of ifs regarding that question that I really couldn't answer with a lot of certainty because the facts might change.
We started out today, Representative Barrett, talking about e-pull tabs, and I wonder what your view is about the prospects for e-pull tabs going forward, whether the state of Minnesota is still going to be looking for, no matter what that figure is from the state, still looking for a different source of revenue.
Yeah, definitely. The e-pull tabs, in my opinion, have very little future in Minnesota. A couple of reasons for that. Primarily is the people that use an iPad generally now are a little bit younger. As they get older, they might gravitate toward a e-pull tab on an iPad. But the fact is, and I know this a little bit, working in Mankato as I did at American Legion, I actually worked in an e-pull tab booth. People that buy e-pull tabs are people that come there with a group of people. They throw $50, $25 down on a table. They have a couple drinks. They open them together throughout the evening. It's a very social thing. An e-pull tab is not a social event. It's a very singular event. And so the two aren't the same. I'm on the tax committee. A lady came to our tax committee from the Bingo Emporium out in middle Minnesota. She wasn't here because of she was here partly because of the Viking situation and the e-pull tabs, but they weren't selling them. I asked her, well, why aren't you selling them? She said, well, people don't want them. Our clientele don't want to play e-bingo. They don't want to play an e-pull tab. They like the old pull tab. And apparently, pull tab sales are going up. I was under the impression that the revenue from pull tabs, paper, were going down historically, and they have been, but this year there's been a spike. So maybe the e-pull tab issue has caused people to do what they want to do, which was pull out the paper and open up paper pull tabs throughout the evening. Could be an unintended positive consequence of the media attention toward the issue of gambling and pull tabs. If nothing else, I thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.